When the war started in 1941, December the 7th, I was 5 days short of being 20 years old. And I've been made a sergeant. That's 3 stripes. I only did that, I was very young, and the only reason I was promoted to that rank was because I was a runner for a major that was in security. And I used to run courier type things to Washington, D.C. from Quantico, Virginia. So anyway, when the war started, December the 7th, I was at Quantico, Virginia, and I had been assigned to aviation. And by December the 11th, we had loaded up all of our equipment, put it on a troop train, heading for California, because all the action was going to be in the Pacific as far as the Marine Corps was concerned. Now you have to remember that I'm pretty young. How many of you guys are 14? Any 15? Well, 4 years from now you'll be 18. That's when I joined the Marine Corps. And I was 5 days short of being 20 years old when the war started. And they put me in charge, the enlisted man, in charge of the troop train going to California. The officer was a warrant officer. Teddy Gooding, I'll never forget him. Anyway, here's a young kid that's never been more than 100 miles from home, in charge of all these troops going to California. So we arrived at what was a fenced-in piece of desert at that time, and we unloaded, and the next day they took us all over to North Island in California, where they split up. They had gathered all the people from around the country and to form these aviation units called Marine Air Groups. And I happened to fall into MAG 13, Marine Air Group 13. And in February, MAG 13 left on a presidential liner. It was a luxury liner, USS President Garfield. The only thing they had proceeded to do was put a stack of bunks to handle the troops, because the carpets were still on the floor, the chandeliers were still there, beautiful ship. But we went over all by ourselves. Went out to win the war. No convoys. The seas were full of Jap submarines, and so it's a miracle that we arrived in American Samoa, was where we went, because that wound up to be one of the staging areas for the Guadalcanal invasion, which was the first offensive move that the United States made in World War II in the Pacific. So I don't know where we go from there, but I was, everybody that is in the war is not a frontline soldier. The things that you guys see on the television, it's always the frontline combat situations. But all these guys that are up there with a rifle, there's probably about 5 or 6 support people behind the lines that are supporting those guys. Everybody doesn't carry a rifle. That's wrong. Everybody has a rifle, but everybody doesn't use it on the front lines. Let me get a drink, I'm getting dry. When you're 97 years old, your saliva glands kind of take a back seat. Anyway, for instance, how many of you folks have heard of Desmond Doss? If you haven't, why Google him up. Desmond Doss was a man that, he was a medic, he was a support person. Didn't carry a rifle, but I was fortunate enough to know Desmond on a one-to-one basis because he was a Seventh-day Adventist and he went to camp meeting every year in North Carolina. And I lived in North Carolina and I went to camp meeting every year. So I had the opportunity every year to sit down while our wives were out doing whatever wives do at camp meeting. Why Desmond and I would sit on a bench and spend the time together. He never, ever talked about his experiences in Okinawa, where he carried those guys down the cliff, 75 guys, you know. So if you don't know his story, or haven't seen the movie about his life, I advise you to see it because it's a great story about a guy who has compassion for his fellow man. Uh-oh. Does that thing go off in 20 minutes or what? Anyway, my role in the Pacific was a support role, you might say, because I was, I'll show you what I wound up doing. I wound up being assigned to Major General Price. He was a commanding general of that area in those days. And this is the airplane that I spent half of my life in. It's a PBY 5A. The 5A designates the fact that you can see the wheel here. It either lands on land or on the water. And wherever Major General Price wanted to go, that's where we flew him to see. And somebody asked how many islands I was in. And wherever the action was, the general wanted to go see what was firsthand, what was going on. So we would fly him there and spend a few days and fly someplace else. And were we in harm's way? We've ducked into the clouds a few times when we saw a flight of Japanese planes, you know. But we were I was fortunate enough to escape 19 months in the Pacific. And whether my guardian angel was with me or not, I don't know, but we all came through unscathed. And you guys might have some questions to ask me. I don't know what you'd like to know, but you know, a lot of the people that I served with didn't come back. They weren't on the front lines. For instance, our cook, Johns, he was a sergeant, and he'd go out on a reef at low tide and throw a couple of hand grenades overboard and go out and pick up the fish to make for the mess hall. You know, that was fresh food we got. When we first went over there, we had World War I rations because we weren't prepared, you know. But anyway, one day he went out to get the fish and he never came back. The tide caught him out there and we found out that he didn't know how to swim, you know. So he drowned supporting the troops. So there was a lot of people that lost their lives in a support role, you know. As I look back, you know, at some of the, Johnny Nolan was he could throw a football 100 yards. You know. He had a contract with I think the New York Giants as a pitcher, but he chose to go into the war, you know. Whether he chose that or whether they drafted him, I can't remember, but we were, the Japanese used to infiltrate our lines at night, and we'd go out on a perimeter guard, and usually the sergeant, the head sergeant, would say, "Zanes, you bring up the rear." So guess who was at the last one out on the perimeter, all by myself? I'll tell you, I've shot more banana leaves than the law allows, because if you sit there, boy, you can see that Japanese guy sneaking through the underbrush, and it'd just be the breeze moving the banana leaves. So you think it was somebody, but we were out on one of those patrols one night, and we were in a Jeep, and all of a sudden, Nolan he was in the front, slumped over, and here a bullet had hit him in the back of the neck, you know, and missed me. Wyatt missed me, and got him, and only the Lord knows, I don't know. But you know, war's not a pretty thing, and I don't know how else to explain it. But I'm glad you know, when you see somebody like this, when you see a guy with these ribbons on his chest, you know that he's been out there protecting you one way or the other. Here's the one I like best. This one up here with a star on it. That's a good conduct medal. That means I was a good boy. Anyway, now the stars, see, I have, the bottom ones are all Korean. The top ones are the World War II. But when you see a guy with these ribbons on him, has the stars on it, that means he was involved in campaigns. Mine happens to have 3 stars. Not that I was there shooting anybody, but I was there to support the campaigns. Anyway, any of you guys got any questions? Fire at me, shoot at me.
Did you, when you enlisted, did you have any friends that enlisted with you, or were you just
all
by your lonesome self?
No, in those days, it was really difficult to get into the Marine Corps. In fact, the day that I went for my physical, as I recall, there was 23 people that went in, and only 4 of us passed.
Oh, wow.
And then once they got you in the Marine Corps, they did everything they could to get you out. Because I went to Paris Island, and old Schumann, he was my drill instructor, and he did everything he could to break you down. What their philosophy was, we'll take this young person, break him down to nothing, and then bring him back as a Marine. And that's what they did.
Do they still kind of do that now?
Well, boot camp is entirely different now these days. It changed when the war started because they had all these mothers calling their congressmen about how mistreated their boys were in boot camp, you know. But the guys that go through boot camp today, they get much more, what do I say? Not necessarily more rigid experience, but they have more high-tech stuff than we had. We had a rifle, belt, and bayonet, and that was it. You know, these guys got all this modern gear that, well, they probably Google up what they were doing, whatever they want now. And, excuse me, my Slavs are done. But, yeah, in fact, Schumann, whether he picked on me or not, I don't know. But when they assigned, I have to tell you a story about that. We were going out, was very close to graduation after 3 months in boot camp. And the first thing that the DI would holler is, all right, outside rifle, belts, and bayonets. And whatever you were doing, you better grab your rifle, belt, and bayonet and get out in the company street and fall in. Well, this little guy from New York, Tedrow, his name was, he couldn't get his sling on his rifle tight because the first thing Schumann does when he slaps that rifle out of your hand, you know, when he inspects it. And if that sling's not tight, you're in trouble. Well, Tedrow couldn't get his sling set. Give me that rifle. And I snatched it down to snatch it back up, to tighten it up in the slings. And I caught the claws under this nail and peeled that nail right back. And boy, did that smart. Anyway, I quick grabbed a handkerchief and wrapped it around there and fell out. Well, this thing saturating my thumb with blood, you know. And when Schumann came to me, I put that rifle up, and he slapped it, and the blood just splattered all over him and all over me. He never cracked a smile. He went on and inspected my rifle, put it down, and then we started to march off. And he called me out and chewed me out for getting blood all over him. And he sent me to the sick bay. And my punishment for that when I got back is I had to drill the platoon, you know. So anyway, I think I have a picture when I went home from boot camp, and you can still see my thumb is wrapped up. So anyway, funny things happen, but anyway, I owe my life to Schumann, and his assistant was named Williams. And they made a man out of me, I'll tell you. Oh, Pamela wants me to tell you about some of my experiences in boot camp. One day and it was an off day. I was standing there with my thumb in my pocket. We wore khakis in those days, not fatigues. And Schumann came around the corner and saw me with my thumb in my pocket, and that was a no-no. So he made me fill my pockets with sand. And is that the one you want me to, or the bucket?
Both of them.
Anyway, so I filled my, and he made me sew them up. So I had to get clean clothes every night. You wash your clothes, and here I got two pockets full of wet sand. I wore those for 3 days. I had raw places there, you know. But anyway, finally I got rid of them, and then another time he caught me doing something, and he said, go get your buddy's GI bucket. Now these pails they weren't what you'd get a bucket today. They were heavy duty, made me fill them with sand, and then I stood there and hold them. And when he told me to put them down, I had held them so long I couldn't get rid of them. I set them down, I couldn't get my hands loose, you know, for quite a while. But that's what, I think he was testing my mettle, you know, to see if he could break me down. Oh, one time we had stacked arms, you know, we have a stacking swivel. And you have three rifles, you hook their swivel together and then form a little pyramid with them. Well, I was from here to you, away from that stack when it decided to fall over. Somebody hadn't stacked it correctly. Schumann says, he accused me of knocking them over. So he says, you'll sleep with those. He didn't mean this way. He meant this way. And I don't know when that man ever slept, because he was in there 2 or 3 times that night to make sure I was sleeping with those rifles, you know? But anyway, life is good.
Did you tell about Christmas Island?
Huh?
Did you tell about Christmas Island?
Oh, who knows the song, I'd like to spend Christmas on Christmas Island? Have you ever heard that song? Well, if you ever hear it, don't believe it. Because we picked up two Army guys down in Tonatabu or Takariba, anyway, down in the Pacific. 2 Army guys had stolen a boat and had drifted a road all the way from Christmas Island, where they were stationed, down in the Tonga group, which is, 1,200 miles of ocean water. So we went down there to pick them up because we were going up that direction, and we took them back to Christmas Island. We landed there and went down to the mess hall. They gave us tents to sleep in, and by 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night, we couldn't sleep because of the mosquitoes and the land crabs. The tents had wooden decks on, and the land crabs, you couldn't sleep because these land crabs keep running across the wooden deck making all this noise, So we finally woke up to the idea that we better go get out of here. We went down to the mess hall, and pretty soon the pilot and the co-pilot showed up and said, let's get out of here. So they lined up a couple of Jeeps down the end of the runway, and off we went. Christmas Island is elevation 6 feet, and wasn't nothing there but land crabs and mosquitoes. And I don't know what it is today. It's probably some kind of resort. But every time I hear that song, I think, brother, don't ever go to Christmas Island.
Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like when you came back to the States? What did you do? Were you at a base or?
Well, when I came back to the States, we
Tell them what you ate there, Dad.
we landed in we came under the Golden Gate Bridge, and I cried. I had been gone for 19 months, and I never expected to see that bridge again. I'm a grown man, and I cried, and I wasn't the only guy either. But we landed there, and we got off the ship, and they have restaurants along there. I went in, and the waitress said, what would you like to have? I said, I want a quart of milk and a head of lettuce. I had drank so much powdered milk, it was terrible. And we didn't have any fresh vegetables, and I missed lettuce the most. So I got a head of lettuce and a quart of milk. That was my homecoming meal. But they took us down to Miramar, which now was a place of, that's the desert we landed in first. And Jayhant was the sergeant major in charge there. And we knew him from Quantico back before the war. So they had all kinds of things to do, for people to do. Clean up this area, do this, do that. Jayhan says, these guys are not gonna do any of that stuff. We had been out of the country the longest of any group, and we weren't about to go around picking up cigarette butts or anything, and Jayhan says, no use trying to get these guys to do anything, they're not gonna do anything. But we were only there in order to get physicals and make sure that we weren't carrying any foreign bodies with us before they gave us liberty. And when I went home.
Where was home?
Home was Paulsboro, New Jersey, a little town south of Camden, across from Philadelphia. In fact, if you land at the Philadelphia airport and look across the river, you'll see a water tower over there. And I was born and raised a block and a half from that water tower. Anyway, when I got home, my mother was in the hospital. She had had her gallbladder taken out. So, and we had a dog. Now, I hadn't seen this dog for 19 months or more. The name was Wimpy, little Cocker Spaniel. And on the way home, I met somebody out in town. I had taken a bus and I met somebody out in town that was walking my direction. And I said, when I get to that telephone pole, I'm going to start to whistle. Because when I worked as a projectionist at night, I would start to whistle and the dog would come and meet me at the door. I said, well, I'm going to start to whistle when I get to that. I started to whistle and that dog went ape. If you go in that house today, you'll still see the scratch marks on the woodwork at the window and at the door, you know. He hadn't heard that whistle for 2 years, and he went berserk when he heard that whistle. But that was my dog, Wimpy. Anyway, I've run out of gas. Have you run out of questions?
You guys have any questions?
Well, I'm telling you, I'm happy to see all you young people. And my life is in your hands, what's left of it. So I want to wish you all the luck in the world. Grab a goal and go for it, you know.